It's a pleasure to have you join me on this virtual journey. Welcome. Thank you for choosing our video on the Hound of the Baskervilles. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the ride. The Hound of the Baskervilles is the third of the 4 crime novels by British writer Arthur Conan Doyle featuring the detective Sherlock Holmes. Originally serialised in the Strand Magazine from August 1901 to April 1902, it is set largely in Dartmoor, Devon, in England's West Country and follows Holmes and Watson investigating the legend of a fearsome, diabolical hound of supernatural origin. This was the first appearance of Holmes since his apparent death in The Final Problem, and the success of The Hound of the Baskervilles led to the character's eventual revival. One of the most famous stories ever written, in 2003, the book was listed as number 128 of 200 on the Big Read poll of the best-loved novel. In 1999, a poll of Sherlockians ranked it as the best of the 4 Holmes novels. Get ready to immerse yourself in the world of plot as we examine its impact and relevance. In London, 1889, Dr. James Mortimer asks for the aid of Sherlock Holmes, beginning by reading him a legend that has run in the Baskerville family since the time of the English Civil War, when Sir Hugo Baskerville kidnapped a farmer's daughter. When the girl escaped, Hugo pursued her, swearing a curse upon himself in his mad rage. Hugo's companions later found the girl dead of fear, and Hugo killed by a demonic hound. The dog is said to have haunted Dartmoor ever since, causing the premature death of many Baskervilles. Mortimer explains that his friend, the philanthropic Baronet Sir Charles Baskerville, took the legend very seriously. Sir Charles, who had a weak heart, had retired to Baskerville Hall in 1887 after amassing a fortune in South Africa. When the baronet's body was later found in a yew alley, with an expression of horror on his face, the death was attributed to cardiac arrest. However, Mortimer had secretly noticed large canine paw prints near the body. Sir Charles had been the eldest of 3 Baskerville brothers, and Sir Henry, the Canadian son of the deceased's second brother, is Sir Charles' heir. The rather immoral third brother, Roger, died of yellow fever in South America in 1876. Mortimer, the executor of Sir Charles's will, fears it might not be wise to bring Sir Henry to Dartmoor, in view of the possible supernatural dangers. Though Holmes dismisses the legend as a fairy tale, he meets with Sir Henry when the new baronet arrives in London. It transpires that strange things are already happening to Sir Henry. One of his old boots has been stolen, he has received an anonymous letter warning him against the moor, and someone has been following him in a hansom. Mortimer reveals that Sir Henry's inheritance is about £740,000 sterling equivalent to in view of these high stakes, Holmes asks Watson to act as Sir Henry's bodyguard and to investigate things in Dartmoor. Upon arriving in Dartmoor, Watson, Mortimer and Sir Henry learn that Selden, a convicted murderer, has escaped from Princeton prison and is loose on the moor. At Baskerville Hall, they are introduced to John and Eliza Barrymore, the married butler and housekeeper. Watson sends detailed accounts of his investigations to Holmes, particularly focusing on the neighborhood residents. The Stapleton siblings stand out. Jack is over-friendly, drops hints about the Hound, and warns Watson against attempting to cross the dangerous Grimpen Mire. His sister Beryl, without his knowledge, repeatedly tries to get Sir Henry to flee back to London. Another neighbour, Mr. Frankland, is a perpetual busybody and troublemaker, including threatening to bring a lawsuit against Dr. Mortimer for excavating nearby barrows. Sir Henry falls in love with Beryl Stapleton, though her brother strongly objects to the romance. Barrymore repeatedly sends candlelight signals to someone on the moor. Following Barrymore one night, Watson and Sir Henry discover that Selden is Mrs. Barrymore's younger brother, and that she and her husband have been leaving food out for him. During an unsuccessful attempt to catch Selden, Watson sees a strange man standing on a tor. Watson and Sir Henry learn from Barrymore that Franklin's estranged daughter Laura had once written to Sir Charles. After a failed attempt to interrogate Laura, Watson investigates the man on the tor and learns that it is Holmes, who has been investigating in secret to hide his direct involvement. Holmes reveals that Jack Stapleton is the murderer, and Beryl is his wife, abused and forced into posing as his sister. However, Holmes does not have enough proof to convince the authorities. Holmes and Watson hear a man fleeing from a baying hound, and later find that Selden has fallen from a cliff and died. Barrymore had given Selden Sir Henry's discarded clothes, and Stapleton's hound, having been set on the trail with Sir Henry's stolen boot, had confused the scent. Later, after dining at Baskerville Hall, Holmes reveals to Watson that the portrait of Sir Hugo Baskerville bears a remarkable resemblance to Stapleton. Holmes decides to use an unwitting Sir Henry as bait. He orders him to visit Stapleton that evening, and then walk across the moor on foot. Holmes and Watson then pretend to leave for London, but instead hide near Stapleton's house with Inspector Lestrade of Scotland Yard. Despite thick fog, they manage to kill the hound when Stapleton unleashes it after Sir Henry. They go to Stapleton's house to arrest him, but find he has bound his wife to a column and fled into the mire, presumably drowning. Holmes remarks that he considers Stapleton one of his most cunning adversaries. Sir Henry and Dr. Mortimer depart on a sea voyage to repair the baronet's shattered nerves. After they leave, Holmes explains to Watson that Jack Stapleton was really Roger Baskerville II, the secret son of Sir Charles' youngest brother. A physical and spiritual throwback to Sir Hugo Baskerville. Roger I had bought a savage black hound and painted it with phosphorus to make it look diabolical, either by fright or direct attack. He hoped the dog would remove all the other heirs so that he could inherit the Baskerville fortune. He had promised Laura marriage, and convinced her to lure Sir Charles out of his house on the night of the murder. Unable to save Sir Charles, Beryl had sent an anonymous letter to Sir Henry to thwart her husband's further schemes. The spotlight now falls on origins and background as we delve deeper into its details. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle wrote this story shortly after returning to his home, Undershore in Surrey, from South Africa, where he had worked as a volunteer physician at the Langman Field Hospital in Bloemfontein during the Second World War. He had not written about Sherlock Holmes in 8 years, having killed off the character in the 1893 story The Final Problem. Although The Hound of the Baskervilles is set before the latter events, 2 years later Conan Doyle brought Holmes back for good, explaining in The Adventure of the Empty House that Holmes had faked his own death. As a result, the character of Holmes occupies a liminal space between being alive and dead, which further lends to the gothic elements of the novel. He was assisted with The Legend of the Hound and local colour by a Daily Express journalist named Bertram Fletcher Robinson, with whom he explored Dartmoor in June 1901. Robinson received a royalty payment that amounted to over £500 by the end of 1901. Doyle may also have been inspired by his own earlier story written and published in 1898 of a terrifying giant wolf, the King of the Foxes. Let's now turn our attention to inspiration and uncover the fascinating insights it brings to the table. His ideas came from the legend of Squire Richard Cobell of Brook Hall, in the parish of Buckfastleigh, Devon, which was the fundamental inspiration for the Baskerville tale of a hellish hound and a cursed country squire. Cabell's tomb survives in the town of Buckfastleigh. Cobell lived for hunting, and was what in those days was described as a monstrously evil man. He gained this reputation, among other things, for immorality and having sold his soul to the devil. There was also a rumour that he had murdered his wife, Elizabeth Fole, a daughter of Sir Edmund Fole, 1st Baronet of Folescombe. On 5 July 1677, he died and was buried in the sepulchre. The night of his interment saw a phantom pack of hounds come baying across the moor to howl at his tomb. From that night on, he could be found leading the phantom pack across the moor, usually on the anniversary of his death. If the pack were not out hunting, they could be found ranging around his grave howling and shrieking. To try to lay the soul to rest, the villagers built a large building around the tomb, and to be doubly sure a huge slab was placed over the top. Moreover, Devon's folklore includes tales of a fearsome supernatural dog known as the Hound that Conan Doyle may have heard. Weller 2002 believes that Baskerville Hall is based on one of three possible houses on or near Dartmoor, Folscombe in the parish of Udborough, the seat of the Fole baronets, Hayford Hall, near Buckfastleigh, also owned by John King of Folscombe, and Brook Hall, in the parish of Buckfastleigh, about 2 miles east of Hayford, the actual home of Richard Cabell. It has also been claimed that Baskerville Hall is based on a property in mid-Wales, built in 1839 by one Thomas Miners Baskerville. The house was formerly named Cliro Court and was renamed Baskerville Hall towards the end of the 19th century. Arthur Conan Doyle was apparently a family friend who often stayed there and may have been aware of a local legend of the Hound of the Baskervilles. Still other tales claim that Conan Doyle was inspired by a holiday in North Norfolk, where the tale of Black Shuck is well known. The Gothic Revival-style Cromer Hall, where Conan Doyle stayed, also closely resembles Doyle's vivid descriptions of Baskerville Hall. James Linham Molloy, a friend of Doyle's, and author of Love's Old Sweet Song, married Florence Baskerville, daughter of Henry Baskerville of Crowsley Park, Oxfordshire. The gates to the park had statues of hellhounds, spears through their mouths. Above the lintel there was another statue of a hellhound. Now, let's shift our focus to technique and embark on an intellectual exploration of its various dimensions. The novel incorporates 5 plots: the ostensible curse story, the 2 red herring subplots concerning Selden and the other stranger living on the moor, the actual events occurring to Baskerville as narrated by Watson, and the hidden plot to be discovered by Holmes. The structure of the novel, starting and ending in the familiar setting in London, is used to delimit the uncanny world associated with the Gothic landscape of the moors, with varying degrees of success. Doyle wrote that the novel was originally conceived as a straight Victorian creeper in the style of Le Fanu, with the idea of introducing Holmes as the deus ex machina arising only later. Moving ahead, let's uncover the hidden gems within publication and discover their significance. The Hound of the Baskervilles was first serialised in the Strand Magazine in 1901. It was well suited for this type of publication, as individual chapters end in cliffhangers. It was printed in the United Kingdom as a novel in March 1902 by George Newnes Limited. It was published in the same year in the United States by McClure, Phillips and Company. As we progress, let's zoom in on original manuscript and examine its role in shaping our overall narrative. In 1902, Doyle's original manuscript of the book was broken up into individual leaves as part of a promotional campaign by Doyle's American publisher. They were used in window displays by individual booksellers. Out of an estimated leaves, only 37 are known still to exist, including all the leaves from Chapter 11, held by the New York Public Library. Other leaves are owned by university libraries in the United States and by private collectors. A newly rediscovered example was sold at auction in 2012 for us. Another one was sold in 2021 for $423,000. The existence of the 37th leaf became publicly known in 2018. It was put up for auction in 2022, but did not sell. Brace yourself for a deep dive into adaptations as we explore its impact and relevance in our evolving narrative. The Hound of the Baskervilles has been adapted in various forms of media. As we enter this new phase, let's uncover the impact of film and television adaptations on our broader topic. Over 20 film and television versions of The Hound of the Baskervilles have been made. Now, let's shift our focus to audio and embark on an intellectual exploration of its various dimensions. Edith Meisser adapted the novel as 6 episodes of the radio series The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes. The episodes aired in February and March 1932, with Richard Gordon as Sherlock Holmes and Lee Lovell as Dr. Watson. Another dramatization of the story aired in November and December 1936, with Gordon as Holmes and Harry West as Watson. The story was also adapted by Meisser as 6 episodes of The New Adventures of Sherlock Holmes, with Basil Rathbone as Holmes and Nigel Bruce as Watson. The episodes aired in January and February 1941. a dramatisation of the novel by Felix Felton, aired on the BBC Light programme in 1958 as part of the radio series, with Carlton Hobbs as Sherlock Holmes and Norman Shelley as Dr. Watson. A different production of The Hound of the Baskervilles, also adapted by Felton and starring Hobbs and Shelley with a different supporting cast, aired in 1961 on the BBC Home Service. The novel was adapted as an episode of CBS Radio Mystery Theatre. The episode, which aired in 1977, starred Kevin McCarthy as Holmes and Lloyd Battista as Watson. The Hound of the Baskervilles has been adapted for radio for the BBC by Bert Cowles on 2 occasions. The first starred Roger Rees as Holmes, Crawford Logan as Watson and Matt Zimmerman as Sir Henry, and was broadcast in 1988 on BBC Radio 4. Following its good reception, Cowles proposed further radio adaptations, which eventually led to the radio series of dramatisations of the entire canon, starring Clive Merrison as Holmes and Michael Williams as Watson. The second adaptation of The Hound of the Baskervilles, featuring this pairing, was broadcast in 1998, and also featured Judi Dench as Mrs. Hudson and Donald Sinden as Sir Charles Baskerville. Clive Nolan and Oliver Wakeman adapted The Hound of the Baskervilles as a progressive rock album in 2002, with narration by Robert Powell. The Hound of the Baskervilles was adapted as 3 episodes of the American radio series The Classic Adventures of Sherlock Holmes, with John Patrick Laurie as Holmes and Lawrence Albert as Watson. The episodes first aired in March 2008. In 2011, Big Finish Productions released their adaptation of the book as part of their second series of Holmes dramas. Holmes was played by Nicholas Briggs, and Watson was played by Richard Earle. In 2014, LA Theatre Works released their production, starring Seamus Dever as Holmes, Jeffrey Arend as Watson, James Masters as Sir Henry, Sarah Drew as Beryl Stapleton, Wilson Bethel as Stapleton, Henry Lubatty as Dr. Mortimer, Christopher Neame as Sir Charles and Frankland, Moira Quirk as Mrs. Hudson and Mrs. Barrymore, and Diane Richardson as Barrymore. In 2017, Bleak December released an abridged full-cast production for Cadabra Records with Sir Derek Jacobi as Holmes. In 2020, Lions Den Theatre released a new adaptation of the novel written and directed by Keith Morrison on the company's YouTube channel. An early version of the play was performed in various locations around Nova Scotia in 2018. In 2021, Audible released a dramatisation by George Mann and Cavan Scott, starring Colin Salmon as Holmes and Stephen Fry as Watson. In 2022, The Hound of the Baskervilles was adapted and conducted as a concert drama by Neil Brand, with the music directed by Timothy Brock, and performed by the BBC Symphony Orchestra. Mark Gatiss and Sanjeev Bhaskar played Holmes and Watson, respectively. The production was recorded at the Barbican Hall on 20 December, and was broadcast on BBC Radio 3 on 22 January 2023. A filmed recording of the reading was broadcast for BBC 4 on 25 December 2023. Get ready for an exciting exploration as we unravel the mysteries of stage. Prolific playwright Tim Kelly adapted the story for the stage in 1976. One production was at Boston's Theatre Loft in 1982. In 2007, Peoplecus Theatre Company premiered a new adaptation of The Hound of the Baskervilles at West Yorkshire Playhouse in Leeds. Adapted by John Nicholson and Stephen Canny, the production involves only 3 actors and was praised by critics for its physical comedy. Following a UK tour, it transferred to the Duchess Theatre in London's West End. The Daily Telegraph described it as a wonderfully delightful spoof, while the Sunday Times praised its mad hilarity that will make you feel quite sane. This adaptation continues to be presented by both amateur and professional companies around the world. Stage performances have also been performed in the UK in dramatisations by Joan Knight, Claire Malcolmson, Harry Meacher, and Roger Sansom, among others. Meacher's version has been produced 3 times, each time with himself the actor playing Holmes. Ken Ludwig offered an adaptation entitled Baskerville, a Sherlock Holmes mystery which premiered as a co-production at Arena Stage, Washington, D.C. in January 2015 and MacArthur Theatre Center in March 2015. In 2021, an adaptation for the stage by Stephen Kenny and John Nicholson for Peoplecus, directed by Tim Jackson and Lot Wakeman, toured the UK, produced by Original Theatre Company and Bolton's Octagon Theatre. It was a continuation of the adaptation that was directed by Lot Wakeman for English Theatre, Frankfurt, Jermyn Street Theatre and Octagon, Bolton. Let's now shift gears and explore video games through a critical lens, uncovering its strengths and weaknesses. The Hound of the Baskervilles is utilized in the final case in the Great Ace Attorney, adventures in which the protagonist teams up with Sherlock Holmes in the original Japanese version to investigate mysteries based on various entries in the Holmes chronology. In particular, the manuscript of The Hound of the Baskervilles is a key part of the case. Sherlock Holmes and The Hound of the Baskervilles is a casual game by Frogwares. It departs from the original plot by introducing clear supernatural elements. Despite its non-canonical plot, it received good reviews. If you found this video helpful, give it a like and share it with someone who might benefit from it.